Hey guys, how you doing? It's Jordy from Seven Eagle Group. I am really excited tonight to have a special guest with us. We have Captain William Toti, retired U.S. Navy veteran, who just came out with this book. It's hot off the presses, and we're going to be talking about some of the amazing content that he has in here. Captain Toti, thank you so much for taking some time tonight to be with us and to share some of your advice and experiences with our community.
Well, thank you, Jordy. Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Let's what I'd love to do is sort of let our audience know a little bit about you. There you are, looking sharp back in the day. So Captain Toti spent 26 years as a commanding officer of the nuclear submarine USS Indianapolis. What got you into the military? Like, how did you decide to go down this path? Like, take us back to your high school days.
Well, back in the 70s, Jordy, during the Vietnam War, actually, there weren't many people who got in for altruistic reasons. The draft had just ended, actually. But I wanted to be an astronaut. And back in those days, the only way to be an astronaut was to be a military pilot. So I ended up in my senior year of high school working for John Glenn, one of my heroes, who was running for Senate in Ohio. And I talked to him about being an astronaut, and I was going to go into the Air Force Academy to be an Air Force pilot. He said, "What the heck's wrong with you? Don't you know I was a Marine? If you're going to be a pilot, you need to be a Marine pilot." And he probably thought it was a harmless prank or joke. Yeah. But I was 16, 17, something like that, and very vulnerable and naive. And so I said, well, okay, well, what academy do I need to go to for that? And it was Annapolis to be a Marine, right? And so I had a problem was I hadn't applied to Annapolis. I applied to the Air Force. And so I needed to kill a year. So I ended up enlisting in the Navy, thinking that, oh, well, that'll really show how much I care. I'm going to enlist in the Navy. And so I was enlisted as a Navy nuke until I was accepted into the Naval Academy the next year. And that's how I got in. Now, the astronaut thing didn't work out. I was nominated, failed the eye exam, kicked out of before I could actually begin astronaut training. And then I ended up in submarines, and as you said, 26 years. Yeah. And it was a great career.
Did you come from a military family, or?
No, my dad was drafted during Korea. He didn't. Yeah. He served in Japan, so he never saw combat. My uncle saw combat in Korea, and my great uncle was in World War II in the Pacific, Guadalcanal. And I've just recently learned he was in the liberation of the Philippines. But he died back in the 90s. Yeah. So, I mean, and every one of these guys, ground pounders, right, said to me, whatever you do, if you ever join the military, if you join the Navy, you will never have to sleep in the mud. And so that kept resonating with me. And
that sounds good.
That's not why I went to Annapolis, but it was one of those things I think. They think that I joined the Navy because they told me I wouldn't have to sleep in the mud, but that wasn't why.
That wasn't it. Wow. Yeah. And so what got you down the path of being an officer on a submarine? Did you start out?
Well, when my eyes went bad, I couldn't be a pilot. And so I actually years later, I was nominated as astronaut mission specialist when they opened that field up, when I was actually a submariner all the way already. But since I couldn't be a pilot because my eyes went bad while I was in the academy, the next best thing, they would probably consider it the best thing. It was the most prestigious thing you could do in the Navy at the time because the Cold War was going. We were going, 1v1 against the Russians, and the nuclear power program and the submarine force was the most prestigious. And so I said, well, I'll do that. And actually had an interview with Admiral Rickover to get in. I wrote about that in the book, by the way. And that's how I ended up in submarines. It was the right career path for me.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like, and then you served 9 years in the Pentagon. Was that after you were on the submarine?
It was actually between. So you go seashore, seashore. And it just so happens that my first short tour was in graduate school. But after that, every time it was time for me to rotate off of sea duty, off of a submarine and take a couple of year break on shore duty. There was some job in the Pentagon that absolutely had to be filled, and I would be sent there. So in total, it was 9 years, but it was over 3 different tours.
That's great. And I think that's a picture. We got a picture of your SSN 697 there in the back of that slide. Yeah, right. I got cut off by your picture, but I'm believing
that's right. It was a great ship with a great crew. And, we really went out in style with that crew. We won, when I was the captain of it, we won every award we could win. It was fantastic. I'm still friends with many of my crew members on Facebook.
Oh, that's terrific. What are you looking back now at that time in the Navy, and what were some of the best experiences, or how did that make you to the man you are today? Like, what did you get out of serving? And
this is going to sound bizarre, but when I was enlisted, my senior chief petty officer in charge of my school was very skeptical. He would laugh at me every time I told him I was going to go to the academy. And when I finally did get accepted and brought it to him and he couldn't laugh anymore, he pulled me out of school. Actually, I was still going to school at the time. He pulled me out of this electronic technician school I was going to and said, okay, in the 3 months you got between now and when you have to report to the academy, your job is cleaning the toilets. So for 3 months, I cleaned toilets. And his statement to me was, I never want you to forget what it's like to be enlisted and with somebody else totally be able to control your life. And so indeed, I cleaned toilets for 3 months, and I never forgot that lesson all the way through. I was Commodore, right? And I never forgot that lesson. I think it did kind of influence the way I treated my sailors. I hope it did anyway.
Yeah.
But the entire experience throughout my career, I tried to be what's referred to in the Navy as a deck plate leader. And you can't ask me whether I succeeded or not. You would have to ask my crew. But there were formative events. The submarine force, we didn't go into ground combat in Afghanistan and Iraq and all of that. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11 when the plane hit the building. I survived. Some of my friends didn't, but that was certainly a formative event in my military career and changed my outlook. A lot of people joined the military because of that over the next 10, 15 years. But, for me, it was refocusing on what this was all about.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, I can't imagine what that must have been like for you to be there. And then a 7-time Legion of Merit Award recipient. That is awesome, man. What an honor that must have been.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good for you. Awesome. So, all right. So now let's go to your transition. You held some incredible jobs working at some big name companies, and then ended up as the CEO at Sparton. What was that like? That transition for you, and how did you know what you wanted to do?
Well, just like everybody that you place, when I was deciding time for me to retire from the Navy after 26 years, first of all, I wanted to do it while I was young enough to have a viable second career. The companies aren't allowed to talk about age, but what they can do is look how many years you're going to have in the workforce. And if we hire you, if we invest in you, will you be with us long enough to get a return on that investment? And I realized if I hit age 50, even though they would never say, well, we're not hiring you because you're 50 years old, you're too old. What they would do would be put me in one of those jobs where I needed to be able to perform immediately and contribute immediately. But if I left the military at a younger age, young enough that they might get some years out of me, they might be willing to invest in me. That was the kind of job I wanted, one where the company was willing to invest in me. But I took all the courses the military sent me to, and I believed everything they told me when I was going into those courses. And what I didn't understand until I got into my industry job was almost everything they told me was wrong. The military, in my case, right, back in 2006 when I went through the courses, the folks teaching the courses, it's a kind of a condition to the blind leading the blind, where it's like trying to take flying lessons from somebody who's never actually flown an airplane. The people who were teaching me that course had never actually served in the kind of industry jobs I hoped to serve in. So the advice they gave me was in some cases laughably bad, but I didn't know it. I believed it, right?
Right.
And in other cases, and in other cases, it was kind of moderately bad and survivable. So when I first got into industry, I think I had a misperception of what my job was going to be like. My company had a misperception about what I was going to be capable of doing. And this could have ended very, very badly for both of us if we didn't figure out pretty quickly, wait a minute, we got a problem here. And both of us worked to correct the problem. So they put me so we admitted it. They were willing to train me. They put me through some training. And it served me extremely well over the course of the next 16 years in industry, to the point where I was able to serve as president of 2 different companies before serving as CEO. But the problem is, over those 16 years, I saw hundreds, if not thousands, of folks come out of the military making the exact same mistakes I did. And that's when I realized that this was systemic, and I needed to do something about it. I couldn't teach people one at a time. So that's when I decided to write all these lessons down and put it in a book. And that's the book that just came out.
That's what, and you were kind enough to get me a copy as well. I am read this, and I tell you, I've been in this industry 8 years, and I love this book. I love the style, the way you've written it. It just makes it so easy to comprehend, and it makes perfect sense. And so I highly recommend anyone listening, go out, get yourself a copy of this, From CEO to CEO. It's on Amazon. It's a great read. You can do it very quickly. It's and the advice in here is just spot on. If more people had that, were armed with this information, I'm telling you, there'd be a lot more really happy people in good jobs that are paying them well, and they're rewarding. So we can't go through everything, but we're gonna touch on some of the main topics here of the book, and I'd love to get your advice and suggestions that we can share with our transitioning service members and veterans who are going to be listening. So the first one is, you determine, okay, I'm going to leave the military. How do you figure out what you want to do? How do you decide? It's so overwhelming, I think, to a lot of people. How do you explore those options, and then how do you then pick the right path?
This is one of the things that I was told when I was transitioning that was wrong. The company that was running the transition training, when I went through it, had us fill out these attribute sheet that said, what do you like doing? What do you not like doing? And where do you want to live? And, there's basically build this matrix. And, it gives you, so I did that, right? And it led me in a certain direction. But it turns out, it was completely wrong. The thing you need to ask yourself isn't, what kind of work do I want to be doing the moment I get out in my first job? The thing you need to be asking yourself is, where do I want to be 10 to 15 years down the road? And then you extrapolate backwards to, okay, if that's where I want to be 10 to 15 years down the road, what's the best job I can pursue right now that has the highest probability of getting me there? And what's the right kind of company to join that has the highest probability of getting me there? And in the book, I talk about the advantages of big company versus small company, public company versus private company, all those different, because each of those choices that you end up making when you pick that first job, some of them may constrain you, box you in. Once I do this, I'm going to be locked into that. So for example, if you're in the IT world and you go into a job that's basically operational IT, where you're providing IT or cyber services for your employer, you'll always be an operational IT person. I mean, there's a risk that you'll always be locked into that. But if you were to go into an IT services company where you're providing IT services to other companies in a business-to-business fashion, then there are IT, not only is there operational IT you can do, but there's IT businesses that you might be able to find yourself in a leadership position for. So again, I talk about all these various factors in the book. I spent a lot of time in IT because for 5 years I was an IT guy in the defense industry, and I was leading a large IT business in Hewlett Packard, which is a commercial company, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so, I have some insight in IT that I wouldn't have if I hadn't done that.
Oh. Well, I like in the book how you, like what you just said, how you break down, hey, here's big versus small company. Here's, you stuff that people who have gone, I would assume, right from high school to the military are probably not exposed to a lot of the stuff that civilian counterparts are. And you make it really simple for people to understand, which I like, because as you said in your book, I think when you would probably agree that most service members, they haven't really thought about what they want to do until it's really at the very end of the process, right? Nor
have they thought about how the business is going to look at them. And so how the business is going to see them, and what the business will expect from them. They don't understand how the business succeeds, what the metrics are that the business uses to measure its own success. And one of my reviewers called the book an pocket MBA, right? Masters in Business Administration. It's not that. Don't worry. It's not a bunch of numbers and all kinds of, but it does introduce you to the concepts that business financial metrics are, quantified in. So it'll give you a basic understanding of how your company will measure its performance, which is something that every employee should understand, not just those employees in senior leadership positions, but everyone down to, the working level should understand how the company is going to measure its own success. Right. So you'd see it from their point of view, which is brilliant. If you can pivot a little and think about that. Give a tip or two about what are some ways someone who is just unsure what they want to do? Maybe they're doing one MOS. I always tell men and women, you don't have to do that same MOS. You're so much more. You have such a great foundation. You can go in any really direction. But what are some ideas or suggestions you might have for people who are unsure? How do they do that soul searching to maybe find a good career path? Yeah, there are certain areas in the military and in fact, I was in 2012 timeframe, I was on the White House working group for certifying military people for civilian jobs. So for example, if you're a medic, how to get civilian certification as an EMT or paramedic, right? And so we worked a lot at that, and a lot of those processes are in place. If you're one of those people who can get a civilian certification that will translate directly into a higher paying civilian job, I say go for it. But if you're not happy with your MS, for example, your infantry, and what's the civilian equivalent of infantry? Don't be discouraged thinking, well, there isn't any. One of the things that I talk about in the book is what's the best time to make a career change. And it is at that point when you leave the military and enter industry. But one of those things that I was told when I was transitioning that I called the great lie is that all your civilian company will want from you, let's say Mr. Infantryman or Miss Infantryman, is good leadership. Right. And in fact, that turns out not to be true. That they're not just looking for you for your leadership skills. In fact, even in the military, good leadership isn't enough, right? You actually need to know something. If you're going to be in armor, you need to know how that tank runs, right? Leadership's not going to save you if you don't know how to operate your tank. And the same thing in industry. So there's a lot you can learn. The thing that I tell people they really need when they transition is something that I refer to as informed passion to learn. Informed because you've gained all this knowledge while you're on active duty. Even if you aren't using that knowledge directly, don't forget it. You are informed. You need to keep that information in your head. Passion. They want people with fire in the belly in the military, just like your sergeant major wants from you in your unit. You know how to drive through the suck. and the civilian company is going to want you to do that too.
Yeah.
That's the passion bit. And then to learn. Your company's going to know you don't know everything you need to succeed in your civilian job. But are you able to learn? They're going to want evidence in your resume, in fact, that you have been put in situations in the past where you needed to learn quickly, because that's exactly the situation you're going to find yourself in when you transition to that civilian job.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. Outstanding. All right, awesome. Now let's talk about some of the tactics, some of the nuts and bolts of landing that job. Everything from, networking and resume writing and interviewing skills. What are some of your favorite tips and suggestions for folks?
Yeah, one of the things I was told again when I transitioned was to turn your resume and civilianize it, right? So don't use your military job description, use civilian. So in my case, for example, instead of CO, commanding officer, they said, say you were the CEO of a nuclear submarine.
Yeah,
and I believed it, and I wrote it that way. And it wasn't until a couple of years later when I was helping my company read military resumes and I saw people laughing at these descriptions. If I say I'm CEO of a submarine, what that tells my employer is I don't actually know what a CEO does, because what I did on that submarine isn't what a CEO does. and so so your transition class told you to lie. I hadn't thought of it that way, right? So what I recommend is don't civilianize, but do simplify your resume. You don't need to give an MOS that nobody's going to understand, but it's okay to say, I was a senior leader. I led a group of, if it's a platoon, let's say I led a group of 40 infantrymen or something like that, or 40 soldiers. It's okay to do things like that. The fact that you were the weapons squad leader, they're not going to care about that, right? What they care about is what size unit you led and what skills you learned in your military assignment was. So be very careful how you write the resume. Let 7 Eagle Group help you with that, because I'm sure they've got great advice in that regard.
Yeah,
and then
go
ahead. When it's time to do the interview, just be honest with them. To be yourself. Don't think that you need to present a different style. I would say be relaxed. One error I see in transitioning military folks is they're so used to, particularly, I would say some services are worse than others. I won't name them. They're so used to being rigid and formal, and then they get into that interview environment, and you can't get them to soften up, and you worry, these people are going to be barking out orders if we hire them. And you don't want to give them the impression that you're that kind of leader that just barks out orders. And I talk about that in the book too. So the interview, just relaxed yourself. It's okay to say you really want the job. Don't be afraid to say that. They actually are glad to hear that, but don't look frantic or desperate in the interview. And then, when it comes time to negotiating your compensation, my advice is let the company make the first move. They're likely to say, well, what are your compensation expectations? And my advice there is to say, I trust that you've done proper market analysis for my position, and I'm comfortable with whatever you suggest, because I guarantee you the company has done market analysis. They know what people in that location doing that kind of job on average are being paid. You haven't done that market analysis. And so I've seen too many veterans price themselves out of a job because they assumed they were worth more than they really were, and then they lost the opportunity. So that's probably good enough for now there, Jordy.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like it. I love that advice you have of just simplify your experience, because you got to remember, chances are it's going to be a civilian reading that resume, and civilian probably the one interviewing. So you got to make it. You got to shine a light on all the great experiences you've had in the military and how that made you a great civilian worker. But you got to you don't want them, you want them imagining you as a civilian, not as a
Yeah.
somebody with the uniform still on. So I love that advice. What would you say as far as networking? One of the challenges I see a lot of people have is I call it just being very reactive. They look at who's advertising a position and I'll apply there. I'll apply there. That sounds good. As opposed to maybe going a little slower once they identify that career path, and then just talking to folks, whether other veterans or civilians, and just talking and networking your way to learn about some of these experiences before jumping in and starting to apply.
Yeah, if you know what company you want to work for, the best thing to do is go to that company's website. Every company has a jobs, link on their website where they have open positions, and go there. LinkedIn is extremely important because recruiters like you, Jordy,
we live on it.
Rely on LinkedIn, right? So make sure your LinkedIn profile is updated. And it's okay to network on LinkedIn. If you're a transitioning military leader and you do the search bar in LinkedIn for transitioning military leaders, you're going to find people who've completed the transition, right? Their last job is transitioning military leader. Now they're employed somewhere else. Don't be afraid to message them, connect with them, ask them, hey, do you have any advice for me? You're working at the company that I want to work at. I see you've already been hired by them. You came out of the military just like me. How did it go? Do you have any advice that I could use? And the third thing I would say is use a headhunter. They know the landscape. They have access to a whole bunch of jobs that you wouldn't know about. Google doesn't get you there. Google is information, is data-rich, information poor, right? So do use a recruiter, and I think you'll find it way more efficient. Find the job you want.
One thing I love in your book that you mentioned, though, is you recommend using recruiters and headhunters, but take responsibility. It's your life. It's your search. Nobody's going to care about it the way you will. Like our team here of managers, we might be working with, 200 service members in one day amongst us. And we're not spending more than a few minutes on any of them, but talk a little bit about that taking that responsibility. And
one thing you got to remember is when you're placed by that recruiter was actually working for the company, not for you. And if you don't do well, the company is going to, it reflects badly on the recruiter as well as you. And so that's really why you need to take control of your search, because I say use recruiters. I used a recruiter for every time I changed jobs, all the way up to my CEO position. They came to me. The recruiter came to me with the job, not me out there searching for it. So the recruiters are worth their weight in gold, but they're not going to rescue you if you get yourself in trouble with your employer. And nobody's going to be more interested in getting you a job than you. So don't give up your search and sit back and wait for the phone to ring. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. Keep searching, bounce ideas off the recruiter if you're wondering about whether something's legitimate or maybe whether you qualify for a particular job before you waste your time. I've seen too many people say, well, I've applied for 20 jobs. I'm going to wait for feedback on them. I probably should hang tight. And that's not the right move, because they're only going to reply to you if they're interested. So you can waste a couple of months waiting for feedback that you never get, because everyone, you were filtered out by the computer or whatever. And so
I love it when
looking.
I love it when the candidates are calling and hey, what's going on? Because it shows that they care and they're interested in that opportunity, so that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't be shy about your search. It's your life. So.
What does it say to the company if you're not aggressive looking for your job? What does that say to the company about how aggressive you're going to be when you're working for them? Right?
Exactly. So good. Awesome stuff. All right. So now the candidate or the service member or veteran has landed that job. What are some of the things that he or she can do to sort of get themselves on the fast track to really stand out. And you talk a lot about all these different tactics that somebody can do in the book, because that's just the start of the journey now.
Yeah, it is. Now, going through this transition is going to be one of the most stressful things you've ever done. Believe it or not. It can be as stressful as going through boot camp, especially if you have a family, right? Because the family's depending on you too. The worst thing to happen is you go through this transition and you add to the stress by not doing well in the job after you've transitioned. And so first thing you got to do, through your entire military career, you've understood the mission. The mission was sacrosanct almost, right? It was altruistic. It was, I'm working in defense of the United States, which is a fantastic mission. Don't think that when you transition to industry, you won't also have a mission, right? It may not be to defend the United States, but it's going to be really, really important to that company and to your family. So make sure you understand and find the mission, because it's still there. It will just have changed. The second thing is, don't assume you know more than you do. Go in with this understanding that I've got to learn. And in particular, if somebody's coming into a job in a company where they're going to be a leader in that, or they're training to be a leader in that company, I tell people, listen, shut your mouth and listen for 2 solid months before you open your mouth to try to prove how smart you are and how pathetic the company was before you joined, right? Yeah, you guys, you don't know anything about this stuff. I've been doing it. That you're going to come across as arrogant and tone deaf if you do that. So, there's the old Abe Lincoln quote, better to stay silent, let them think you're a fool, than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. You want to make sure that you listen. And in my case, I was an officer, right? So I said, when I took my first civilian job, I told myself, okay, I'm an ensign all over again. I'm not a captain anymore. I'm an ensign all over again. In this environment, I have no idea what it takes to succeed. So if I don't take the attitude that I'm an ensign and humble myself, then I'm going to have more troubles, not less. And that's what I recommend other people do as well.
Yeah, that's great. Just be a sponge, and then you have lots of great ideas, but just go slow with those. Don't jump out of the gate with them. That's great. Awesome. This is one of the things I just love the most about you. You had this incredible, distinguished career, and then you come out and spend all this time and effort writing this book because you just care so deeply about your brothers and sisters, and you don't want them to, if somebody at your level, you had some challenges with that transition. Can only imagine what somebody who serves 4 years, like you said, infantry, and now is out on their own trying to navigate this really confusing and challenging process of finding a job. So talk about, first of all, like, why did you do that? What made you to go out and write this book? And then why should others sort of follow your lead, and let's all help each other. Let's give back. We're all in this together attitude. Why is that so important?
It was exactly that, Jordy. I would, over the course of my 16 years as a hiring manager, I hired hundreds of veterans, maybe thousands, maybe over 1,000. I didn't count. And I, when I transitioned, I made mistakes. My company was helpful enough to make sure that I corrected those mistakes and got off on the right foot so I could succeed. I have helped individual veterans as they transition to make sure they didn't make the same kind of mistakes. And the problem is, though, you can only do that. It's not very efficient helping one at a time. And when I was finally CEO, and I actually hired a very senior military person and watched them make exactly the same mistakes. And I said, look, let me sit down and write all this stuff down. And my initial intent was to write it down for a small audience. And this is all observation of what I think you were probably told and what the truth is and how to fix it. As I started writing, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I said, holy cow, before long, this thing's going to be a book. Maybe the best thing to do is publish it as a book and let everybody get it. And let me tell you, I didn't do it to make money. I'm never going to break even on this project. It cost me a lot of money to do this. And I'm doing it for what you say, Jordy, it's to pay it forward, because I'm hoping that, I could touch thousands of veterans instead of, a few, and let them learn from these lessons instead of the few that was learning from me before.
Oh, you definitely will, because it's just such a well-written book, and it's going to spread like wildfire. I know, and I'm going to do whatever I can to share it with other influencers in the community as well. Talk about now, why should other people who maybe are going through this process of transitioning and having a tough time finding a job, they land a job, why should we help each other? Why should they come back and maybe share their experiences, and how can that help somebody else?
Yeah, so here's the deal. Companies have been led to believe, and some of them actually honestly believe it. I don't want to, and I'm talking about company hiring managers, company executives who've never served. I'll just say they've bought into the notion that it's a good thing and an altruistic thing to hire veterans. That's wonderful. Now let's just let that sit on the shelf for a while. And then let me ask you, let's say they do hire veterans, some other guy, not you, and that veteran fails. And then another veteran fails. Right. And then another veteran fails. Now, what does that company start to think about whether it's a good idea to hire veterans or not? They start thinking, you know what, maybe this is a patriotic, nationalistic, altruistic thing to do, but maybe it's not such a good thing for the company. We're bringing all these people in, and they only last months or a couple of years, and we either have to let them go or they quit because it wasn't a good fit. Right. If we allow our brothers and sister veterans to fail, that's the situation we set up. We set up a condition where companies are going to be soured into hiring veterans. They're not going to want to do it anymore. That's why it's in everybody's best interest to make sure every other veteran does a good job and succeeds. Yeah. And even just sharing your story of, hey, here I'm struggling trying to network or writing. Hey, what can I do to help you guys? Because, oh man, there's no better feeling. And I didn't serve, but when we headhunt or call a veteran or service member and they say, you're the first person to ever reach out to me to help me with my career, it's such a great feeling, because you just have to do so little to help somebody. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take a big effort, Yeah. So. Oh, I agree with that. And in my case, the effort's done, right? So the book is written.
Yeah. Exactly.
I just need to make sure people know about it so they can learn from it, not make the same mistakes.
Yeah. Well, hey, there is no doubt you are going to touch so many people with this book, and I'm excited to help share it. As any veteran out there who wants to get a copy, it's on Amazon.
Or any transitioning service member, right? And it's not just Amazon; it's everywhere. It's all over in bookstores.
Over. Awesome. And you also have an audio book you just told me earlier, which is great. If you're like me, I prefer listening to books on when I'm exercising or in the car. And you have a version there you can buy as well. And then you have an awesome offer for 10 of our active duty service members transitioning. Why don't you share that?
Well, for today's audience only, the 7 Eagle Group audience, the first 10 active duty service members who email me at William Toti. You can see how my name is spelled on the book cover.
We'll put it on the announcement.
So William at williamtoti.com. Toti is spelled Tango Oscar Tango India. You guys speak phonetic alphabet, so that's so williamtoti.com. So email me at williamtoti.com. The first 10 active duty service members who email me, I'll get you a free copy of the audiobook on Audible.
Look at that.
Now, there's the email address. Thank you very much.
Look what he threw up there. Attaboy.
Appreciate it, Jethro.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you for that offer. That's a really great one. Everybody, thank you guys so much for watching tonight. I hope you got some incredible information out of all this great advice that Captain Toti shared with us tonight. If you haven't had a chance, please join our talent network at 7eagle.com. This will get you on the radar of all of our recruiting managers. We have about 30 of them here at 7 Eagle Group. Plus, we share our talent network with any company who's interested in hiring military. We give them free access to help because we just want more and more people connecting with these great opportunities. We have some social pages as well. If you haven't, make sure to follow. And then I'm always available, as you guys know, to chat one-on-one. I love doing it. Any moment I have to talk with somebody and help with your career and help you brainstorm to find that career path or anything you want to talk about, I'm always available to you. So, Captain, thank you again so much. This was an incredible session. Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it. See you.